Okay, thank you very, very much, Tom and Janet, for yet again your tireless effort in putting this event together, and of course all of you who've come here today and people out there watching this on the live stream. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I get the opportunity to put up on the stage some of the top-line numbers that relate to this industry in the Asia-Pacific region. As Albert Einstein said, do one thing every day that scares you. I'm not sure he was thinking about the movie industry, but those of you who are engaged in making the product, I think you know where he was coming from. I'm going to walk you through some of the key economic data points that relate to the film and resonate, hopefully, with you as participants and creators and journalists, and hopefully set the context of, as Janet said, while we have focused on China over the years, I'm going to sort of broaden it a little bit and touch on the other markets that are major drivers in Asia, in particular Japan and South Korea as well. The first slide up there really tells you what you need to know about this region. It has the #1 box office in the whole world. It is a really, really important region economically and, of course, for the content that is being made. 8 out of the top 20 markets in the world, including America, of course, that leads the way, are based in the Asia-Pacific region. And they account for over 40% of the total revenue. Really impressive numbers. The next slide I'm going to put up is what we call our economic contribution reports. And you'll find on your desks a couple of sheets. One of them is China, and one of them is South Korea. The China one was published earlier this year in January, and the Korea one is actually not going to be published until December, but the summary sheet is the top-line numbers that we're giving you the exclusive on here today. And I don't have a sheet in front of me, but we also, just last week, released our numbers in Japan. And the MPA is very fortunate that we have great support, of course, from the studios I represent, but also from local industry to pull these key data points together. And I think when you look at it, you will see the top-line numbers there of how important the industry is as a contributor to GDP, but also to the tax revenue. And then finally, for the number of people who are actually employed in this industry. And of course, the statistics are there. I'm not going to read every line there. This is a top-line note for you. But those numbers are there, and it's an impressive number. When I work with governments in the region and with local industry, it's a great reminder that this is an industry that not only contributes to the well-being of people and gives the entertainment value and the culture, but the bottom line, it's a real revenue driver. And I think that's really important for us to be aware of. And for us in the MPA, we publish these reports every couple of years, and we're able to track those changes. And it's an industry which is growing. This is one of the few industries where, as much as AI is coming in and people talk about the jobs disappearing, when you create content, you need people. You really need people to make a film. And so, we are in definitely a growth industry across the whole of Asia Pacific. Next slide. And if you look at the top-line numbers in terms of how many screens are in Asia Pacific, the China one always blows me away in terms of how many new screens are being added every day. The number there is 60,000, but I think this year, again, it depends which statistics you look at, it's either 23 or 26 screens are being added every single day. And that number still amazes me when I think about it. But if you look at the average admissions per head, it's still only 1. And then you compare that with Korea, which is a very mature marketplace, and you're looking at 4. So the upside is there. And I think you'll start to see those numbers increase. We have in China anyway. This used to be even reached 1 a few years ago. And Japan also, pretty low down at 1, but again, not a great screen capacity there at the moment, and difficult with real estate and land and the population density where it's concentrated as well. But the good news is that more people are going to the cinema than ever before in Asia. There's no question about that. And again, if you look at the overriding statistics, you'll find there are more people going to movies in not only China, but also India than virtually any other countries in the world. And again, you will continue to see that grow in the years ahead. When I look at the next slide. When I look at those top markets, our films do very well. There's no question about that. You know, in China, these are our top 3 films, and if you look at that revenue number for Avengers Endgame, that's truly staggering, and that's off a release window of just 1 month. And equally, Hobbs and Shaw, terrific numbers, and Spider-Man as well. And it's interesting that when I meet with government officials, and Chinese government officials in particular, I'm often criticized for our members making these blockbuster-type movies when we should maybe be focusing on more family-orientated and drama-type movies. But it's a business, and those numbers tell the story. This is what the audiences like to see, and as long as audiences like to see those movies, I'm sure that we will respond and make those types of movies. If you look at the top 3 films in Japan, then again, Disney, of course, doing incredibly well there with some beautiful films, finding a good audience base. But great revenue numbers, great films, really, really well received. And I was recently in Japan, and I saw The Joker on a Monday evening at 6:30. Capacity was about 90% on a Monday evening. So audiences really warming to these big films. And then if you look at Korea, similar type of film, Avengers again, obviously doing incredibly well there, but a very similar spread of what the top films are in these markets. And then if you look, and I always like to pull this slide up, in particular on China. I know we're supposed to be looking more regionally, but China is a very important marketplace. There's no question about that. There were 8 films in 2018 that made more revenue in China than they did in America. So China, for the American industry and Hollywood in particular, is a critical marketplace for us. And if we look in the current year, there are currently 4 films that have done better in China than they have in America. And I think that, again, tells a story of how important this marketplace is for American filmmakers. But it's not just at the theatrical release level that we're looking at. One of the important areas is partnerships. And if you look, for example, with Tencent and the partnership they're doing with Disney right now, I think this is just the start of things to come, where they've teamed up to develop a Chinese Star Wars online novel series. And they've taken 40 older ebooks, made them into Chinese, and really trying to embrace that audience with the Star Wars story. And I think, again, Star Wars and that type of initiative will continue to grow in this region. Next slide. And then if you look across the region, in particular, Japanese films are finding an audience mainly in China, and about 12 months ago, I would have said also in Korea. Bit of a slowdown there for diplomatic reasons. And if you've been reading that, I think you'll understand that. But generally, Japanese films have been traveling well into China. And this year in particular, Japanese films have had 6 films in China released, whereas India has had 1 and Korea has 0. So the China market for Japanese films has done particularly well. And in particular, the film Shoplifters, which, an award-winning film, an Oscar nomination, won the Cannes Palme d'Or. That made $14.1 million in China, which is probably the most successful overseas film revenue they've had from a Japanese production. So I think that is a marketplace that right now is very, very, very topical, and I think critical to the Japanese industry. And in fact, that a number of Chinese producers are working in collaboration with Japanese producers and looking at how they can do co-productions. That will hopefully hit both marketplaces. Generally speaking, Chinese films don't do that well in Japan, but hopefully with the right mix of product, they will be able to do that. And right now, there is Detective Chinatown franchise, Wanda's Detective China franchise is actually shooting in Tokyo. So I think that creates an opportunity for a film that may resonate and cross over into both markets and hopefully generate continued interest in the Japanese marketplace for Chinese films. And also it was announced at TIFCOM that the Japanese and Chinese partners are looking to produce a co-production remake of Still Life. So that too, the remake opportunities are obviously always there. In terms of animation, I see Asia continuing to grow. Already, if you look inwards at the various countries, they do some terrific animations. And I think you will see that will have an easier appeal to move between markets. Of course, the translation side of it makes it a lot easier in animation than it does for traditional film. But I think there's a huge recognition that there is a growing marketplace for that. And earlier this year, I saw White Snake in China, did incredibly well. I think it was Warner Brothers that released that. But that type of product, I think, will certainly travel around the Asia region. And co-productions will probably be easier in that space as well. And it's also very interesting that our streaming platforms are also now getting going. The fact that obviously Netflix up front and central, doing incredibly well across Asia, and whereas they may not be in China, the fact is they are actually taking Chinese product and distributing it across the world. Wandering Earth is a great example of that, a film that obviously did very, very well in China and deserved a global audience that through traditional distribution would be hard to do, but with an OTT platform, one that can find marketplaces throughout the world, and a film, again, that I think will bring great credit to the ability of Chinese producers. And also, just as a consumer myself, my ability now to watch product from all over the world, whether I'm watching stuff from product from Europe or South America or across other parts of Asia, it's going to be far easier for everybody to be able to capture those products. So I think the created video marketplace, and if you looked at the statistics earlier when we looked at the video audiences, Korea really up there, but there's a huge growth potential in those other marketplaces, and Japan for a period has certainly been a laggard in terms of digital releases, but that will change in the coming months and years ahead. And in particular, another film that is being co-produced is Flowers of Youth, made by the same people who did the very popular Your Name. So again, these local co-productions in Asia are taking place. And often I've stood on this stage and talked about co-productions between China and America. I think those co-productions are going to take place much more frequently around Asia and other parts of the world. I was at the Venice Film Festival looking at co-production markets there, and they in fact have signed a treaty with China. So, everybody is looking at the opportunity there, and China just is not focused on only America for those products that they can combine with and do some more locally focused products. So in conclusion, what I would say, of course, there's a lot of politics at play, and I'm mindful that I'm being broadcast, but of course the macro politics of America and China overshadow often the industry. But what I can say for certainly our sector in China, the studios that I represent are releasing great films. They're finding a great audience. We're getting paid. There's been no slowdown in the number of films that we're getting in, and there's no slowdown in the audience. The statistics tell the tale. Our films are finding a marketplace there and are doing incredibly well. So I'm delighted by that. And I think if you look underneath that across the whole region, there are opportunities that will continue to present themselves even in the backdrop of some of the political issues that are in play. And I'm looking right now, the China-Korea situation, obviously a little bit delicate, and there is a bit of an impact there. But I think the China one often gets a little bit overplayed, that our industry is in trouble. It's certainly not. And I see the opportunity not only for our industry, but the whole of the Chinese industry to grow, as I do in Japan and Korea and everywhere else in Asia. I think the OTT environment will mean that not just our studios are going to be coming with their product offerings, but local industry are responding with their own platforms as well. And the viewers are going to have more choice than ever before. So I'd say the future is, certainly in Asia, is very, very bright. I am optimistic about it. And when I wake up in the morning and get that first cup of coffee, I know it's going to be a good day. And I think today will be a great day. Thank you very much.